Good evening, all. And this is Amitabh Kumar from People Bridge. And it's a really big pleasure to have you all with us today evening. And we have a very distinguished speaker, Mr. Rajesh Padmanabhan. And I will not introduce, Rajesh Padmanabhan because I think everyone who is someone in HR knows him and has had the benefit of hearing from him. And it's really an honor for us that he has taken out some precise, very precious time from his busy schedule to speak to us, and it's a very interesting topic also, and I definitely look forward to hearing from Rajesh. The and I will hand it over to Subir for as he will take this conversation forward. Please introduce yourself. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box, and whatever questions you have, we will definitely note it down. Please type it out in the chat box in the end of it, and Subir will help you get those questions answered. So over to you, Subir.
Okay, thanks, Amitav.
Yeah.
Welcome, Rajesh, and welcome, friends who have joined us in this webinar. I'm sure Rajesh doesn't need any introduction, but I still have something which I can speak about him. He's acclaimed HR thought leader and is a 6x6 matrix professional. He has done 6 roles in 6 varied industries: systems, IT business head, corporate strategy, consulting, banking, and global HR. Yeah, Rajesh is an expert in people transformation. He has done it with various companies, last one being Wellspin, where he was associated as a director and group CHRO. Prior to Wellspin, Rajesh was president and group CHRO for Vedanta Group. And prior to that, he has worked with Capgemini and other companies, and including ICICI Bank. So welcome, Rajesh. The stage is yours. He will be speaking on people transformation and new age skills, what HR professionals and I think all the professionals will require to succeed in coming times. So I hand it over to Rajesh to start his talks.
Hi, thank you so much, Subir and Amitabh for the introduction, and look forward to this session. What I'm going to do is for the next 40 minutes, speak a little bit about people transformation and then walk you through a presentation as well, which I put together with some disclaimers. The disclaimer is it's entirely proprietary, number one. Number two is the entire presentation is done on the basis of a view of a practicing manager, and they are not borrowed thoughts at all. They're just my own. I'll back it up with examples wherever I can. I'm trying to restrict this to about 40 minutes of talk time so that we have a reasonable amount of time towards the end for our interactive question and answers, if any. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is people transformation. Before I share my entire presentation, when I talk why people transformation, why are we talking of people transformation? So I want to start with a little bit of a preamble. We are right now in this stage and in the world of COVIDization, as I call it. And COVIDization clearly has put the world where every single individual has changed or has moved 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 360 degrees. We don't know what the change really means to each one of us, but definitely there's a big, big change that everyone anticipates, number one. So irrespective of the degree of change, that there is a massive change that everyone sees coming, number one. Number two is, if I were to go back in history and particularly post-independence, where we've clearly seen considerable amount of progress having been made under different large transformations that the world has seen and our country also has seen, particularly the era of industrialization was one real big one. The second one, we did see a real growth as far as the economic growth is concerned, though there have been ups and downs. And we did see significant amount of globalization as well. And at some stage, there was also protectionism and then deglobalization also that stuff that had. And we saw the IT boom or the entire IT revolution, the entire growth happening because of IT services and the entire transformation happening, particularly in the last few years on account of digital. We've got so hooked on to this entire game of digital that we handed over so much into the machines and we started living in a world of complete suspended animation, not knowing what to do till the time a virus really impacted all of us and have altered our entire, not just way of working, but way of living as well. And that's where we're right now in this topic of transformation. Without any exception, if we were to all look at, whether as individuals, as teams, as businesses, as countries, and even as the world, everyone needs to change. Whether it's the president of US or a farmer right now here in India, everyone knows that they need to move from an A to B without knowing what that B is all about. Yeah. So there's a huge amount of state of blurring what is that next stage which nobody knows. But a few parameters have come in as common. Like, for example, all of us realized during this COVIDization or this COVID phase that life is bigger than work. I think that's a very strong realization and reflection, number one. Number two, I think there's also realization that social businesses are becoming bigger than commercial businesses. The how part of the business is becoming more important than what are the businesses. And also from an HR specs, if I were to look at, the entire aspect of careers and jobs will possibly be a little more limited, and what will be more relevant will be the aspect of more experience. So people are going to really build their entire profiles and stacks around experiences. So we're talking of every single individual going through this entire process of turmoil within themselves, physically, emotionally, and also with respect to the entire mental abilities as well. Everyone is going through a complete process of relatedness as well, where you're bringing your soul, mind, your physical, and your heart together and going through this process. Needless to say, it's causing stress, it's causing anxiety, it's causing fear or uncertainty as well. But all of us need to know that there's something that each one of us will need to handle. And that is why the relevance of this entire transformation that I'm going to talk about. Also, purely from an expertise lens in terms of understanding the entire human behavior, having done a lot of work and particularly research work around the entire human value chain. I simple, just I put it in a very simple terms to say a human behavior that we see as an outcome or as an output is a function of abilities and motivation. Abilities is further a function of culture, education, experience, expectations, and the environment, which is CE4 kind of a model. And the motivation part of it comes from the sheer fact that each of us are very different and unique, which is the personality part of it, and the environment that we are in. So the entire complex value chain of how we respond to change, how we really adapt, how do we really build ourselves and go through this process of the entire internal process transformation is very essential. No one needs to understand this macro at this stage. It's complex, but one needs to know that there's a lot of state of change that one goes through, and it's not just the state with respect to just way of doing or way of working, but then there's the entire new journey that one needs to get into. The new need is surely there, and that is the reason I said let me put something where I'm going to talk about 18 competencies which are going to be very, very relevant, or the new age skills as I call it, which are going to be very relevant. But before I put that, I think there are only two stuff that's very relevant to each one of us, and I encourage each one of you to practice this very, very hard during the space of transformation. One is feedback, and the other is reflection. The new age skills will teach you reflection, but feedback can come from any single source. It can come from an infant, or it can come from from your CEO or wherever. I mean, it doesn't matter. Even personal friends or family can contribute. So never block a feedback, and then the process of reflection is what this entire transformation is all about. Give me 30 seconds before I switch on the slides and we go through those slides. So what I'm going to talk to you about in the next maybe 30 to 35 minutes are, 18 new age life skills. Yeah, I'm not saying this is going to really, all of them are going to be relevant and impactful for each one of you singularly, but I think there'll be a host of them which you may find, ticking as you as I walk you through. So please do make notes. I encourage you to make notes, and towards the end, we can definitely have interaction. The list that I put together is very dynamic, and I keep refreshing from time to time, depending upon the situation of the entire dynamism of what needs to be done at that point of time. So a refresh is definitely needed. Yeah, so let's go through this. The first one that I call is influence and don't manage. I'm sure all of us have heard this, but I want to go slightly deeper to explain what this really means. Come to think of it, in our own workspace, where we end up managing people. I think post freedom, I guess, post independence, or post the entire management era in the late 70s, we've been left with this word manage, and we've continued to live with it. Does it still hold good? Yeah. We have always been putting people in boxes. That's the way we've been taught in organization structure designs, and we keep putting them as drop down boxes. Does it really hold good in today's world? Even an infant does not like to be managed. Do we really manage people? Do we really want to be managing people in this particular stage where everyone is really going to be liberated and seeking independence? The aspect of influence does come into play. By influence, what I really mean is you influence outcome, you influence process flows, you influence the entire channelization of energy, but definitely don't need to manage. Somewhere along this entire journey, we seem to have got into this obsession of managing people. The first and foremost thing that people start using words like, subordinate, and start showing organization structure to say I manage 500 people, 700 people, 1,000 people. I think we somewhere got into this mindset of managing people, irrespective of whether it's a real-time world, whether it's a real world or a services industry. It doesn't matter. I think this entire mindset needs to change, that there is no need to manage people. And this influencing bit of it, I call it as a tick in the mind, which actually takes you to higher levels of leadership. Easier said than done. One needs to practice this really hard if one needs to get there. But this is something which is absolutely the right one for inspirational leadership. If you need people to look up to you, don't manage, influence them. So long as you're energizing them, you're adding value, you're showing guidance, you're giving them the necessary direction to take to the higher levels, you're influencing. So that's the first one for this evening. We move on, and I speak about the transformational abilities. All along in the last 2 or 3 decades, we've spoken about change management. Change is a constant. Change is something as business as usual, etc., etc. But I think the importance of the entire transformational abilities, I just go back to the point that I mentioned during the entire opening preamble, where I'm saying transformation means the entire process of change, not just in a role change from an A to B, but the entire shift of all the quotients of yours coming together, the physical part of it, the emotional, the mental, and the entire relatedness quotient which drives from the soul as well, is the transformation. One needs to build this. It doesn't come automatically. You've got to know yourself very, very well. You've got to go deep within you to make this transformation happen. Right now, I'm sure, and that's the reason I started with that particular aspect of feedback and reflection. A lot of us would know some parts of us, but if anybody were to say that they know themselves 100%, it's a clear lie, because no one would know themselves completely. And that's the reason the importance of feedback, and particularly when you're attributing it towards transformation, and when you want to move from A to B. And also realize that when you're making certain transformation in any of those areas, what really happens is something which is not there starts creeping in. So what is possibly a strength will start becoming a weakness. Yeah, so etc., etc. So you need to be aware, and the only way to do it in a dynamic world is to work through the process of feedback and reflection at all points of time. And reflection is not just alone. I mean, you can keep reflecting with others as well. Use specialists in the process as well, and work through this entire stuff. You start off at maybe step one, but as you really walk up the ladder, you'll realize yourself that you are evolving. It does take a lot of effort and commitment to walk this particular journey, But once you're on, you'll really enjoy this particular journey. We move on to the third one, which is a very understated skill. Yeah, a lot of people have massive abilities to strategize, bring a lot of things into light, plan well. But what really makes one successful is the ability to execute well. So I call it like make things happen. Making things happen is like sheer finishing, going to the last mile and executing it. There's no point starting so many things unless you know how to finish. Executional abilities is something that I call as a key leadership competency. You need to know how to make things happen. And even in the Wellspun world, I never shied away from the fact to state that one of the competencies of Wellspun was like high on delivery and capability, high on delivery and execution. And I would many a times say that 50% of the strategy is achieved if you know how to deliver. I think so. Simplistically put, I think making things happen is a very understated skill. Yeah, people normally ignore this, but have this passion for executional rigor and taking it to the last mile and making it happen. We move on to the team effectiveness part of it. We've come to a stage where the entire COVID-19 has redefined the world. We're not going to be using words like team playing, team building, or creating winning teams alone. We're talking about a huge amount of interrelatedness or interdependencies, if you like. What it really means is, how can I win and make others win as well? So we're not using any of those words like playing, winning, dynamics, but effectiveness is a very caring and an empathetic model where each of us, in whatever we choose to do, are in a highly empathetic state of delivery, where not only do we need to understand what is that we are doing and bringing to the table, but also we need to ensure that we are empathetic about other stakeholders in the system and how do we make them successful as well. Yeah, so this empathetic and care model, as I call it, is what is the entire aspect of team effectiveness. One will need to go through a little bit of a rejig here because of the fact that a lot of remote working is going to come into play. We've always been many a times used to having teams in front of us, at least the huddle meets, even if we were like remote working or telecommuting. But effectively, I think we always used to have teams in front of us at the first given opportunity. So we may have the luxury, we may not have the luxury. One would really need to understand deep in terms of how to play this effectively in this new age world. And that's the reason I'm emphasizing on this team effectiveness as the fourth competency. We move on to the fifth one. And the fifth one that I'm talking about is strategic thinking and action. Yeah. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a disclaimer here and a little bit of a pun as well, if you like. Strategy is possibly the most abused word in management. Yeah, and I also dare to say that 95% of the people who use the word strategy seldom or many a times don't know what it really means. And I'm going to give you some simple tenets of how to understand strategy. Happy if you can guys note it down. There are four elements in a strategy, and unless these four elements are there together, it's not strategy. A strategy needs to have a vision, it needs to have goals, it needs to have actions to back those goals, and you need to see results which you can measure. Unless these four really come together, it's not strategy. So one needs to be very clear to put all those tenets together and be very clear in terms of how you're going to approach. Many a times in a situation like we are right now grappling with, there are a lot of unknown variables with respect to the future. But nevertheless, one should be able to still strategize and still be in a position to, put some kind of a vision and a direction. Call it revisioning, call it rethinking, call it, the new goals, and you can keep it as dynamic as you want. But completely needed to go back to the drawing board. While I'm talking about more of enterprise leadership capabilities, it does hold good at an individual level as well. So even if one were to recast themselves, I think one would need to go through this particular process of how do I, make my own vision? How do I put some goals around me? How do I really make plans to realize those goals? And how do I really put some measures, or results, as I call it, to ensure that I know that I'm making the needle move and in a forward direction. Needless to say, I think I've coined the word of action along with that. The only reason why I'm putting that is it is, strategy is never complete unless you back it up with considerable amount of action. We move on to the business sense. We have again heard this as a capability, but it comes in a slightly redefined manner. And the redefined manner is businesses today are not competed with businesses. All along, we always used to know it as industry practices. Businesses today are competed by platforms. You don't even know who's pulling the carpet under your feet. You keep looking at your industry peers within the industry and feel that's a competitive set till the time something around a digital disruption happens and some platform completely makes your business unviable. So all that we do in terms of relevance as we build this entire new age skills, one needs to be completely aware of the fact in whatever businesses that we are in, how do we see it? We need to have a fair bit of a hold in terms of what the businesses are and some of those lurking shadows, which we will need to see beyond the industry as well. To have a complete deep domain understanding of the business is one, but to also have a reasonable understanding from those lurking shadows of those platforms as well is something that one would need to develop as we go along, because you just are not in a position to figure out where is your competition or where is your near competition. You may assume to be in a position one in industry or a position two in industry, but then that can change overnight. So this deep down understanding of the business in the domain is absolutely fundamental and critical, and it requires a very, very new sense of direction as we move forward. Yeah, some of those conventional definitions of business partnering will get actually pushed a little behind as we take this new redefinition and we start reimagining and we start repositioning as well. Absolutely key to revitalize this, reimagine, and get into the new zone. We move on to the seventh one, which is commercial acumen and cost competitiveness. Absolutely key in this COVID phase. I'm sure every single CEO, but not just the CEO, all of us, whether we are running our domestic by home budgets or whether we are running our team budgets or whether we are running our business budgets, I think I'm not asking you guys to be frugal, but I'm asking that, there's got to be a huge commercial sense that has got to be there. Not that it was not that it was not there, but the commercial acumen is the new business as usual. We're not going to drive this as business initiatives or as transformation measures like periodically from time to time. This is going to stay with us as business as usual. It's important to be prudent and not to leave any money on the table at an individual level, at a team level, at a business level, at a country level. One has got to be extremely competitive, and you've got to understand money. And we're all really going through that particular change and transformation right now, whether we're doing something at the personal front, on the home front, or whether we are doing our roles in enterprises or running our businesses. So this is again very crucial at this stage, and I would assume I would give it a lot of weightage in this new age skills as we actually bring back the entire aspect of a new fold or a new image in terms of the recast. It's all about culture, of course, I mean, needless to say, but again with a little bit of a new dimension. We've always heard and we've always been using this, and we've often spoken about culture, and I don't need to preach to everyone about culture because I'm sure all of you have a fair understanding of what culture is, and we all keep saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. But the rehash that needs to be done around culture is how are we going to demonstrate character? How are we going to demonstrate that the same cultural tenets really holds good? I've heard a lot about, many of the enterprises talking about people first. Yeah. And this is the time to really demonstrate, are we really holding people in the same light as how we would hold out customers. Yeah, and those are some of the cultural values. Culture is nothing but the organizational work habits that really unifies all of us. It's the foundation of how we build a team and an organization and a business. Yeah, and that tenet and the foundation is something that you can never shake or never rebuild. You've just got to keep reinforcing that. You can build reinforced structures, but you've got to be very solid about some of those cultural aspects of it. It's important you go through the grind again, just to revisit some of those cultural tenets, and again, just ensure that the entire organization and team and you in particular are completely aligned to the culture. If there is a disjointed effort in terms of culture, there is a clear breakage point and one needs to call it out. Absolutely no two ways about it. Yeah. We've heard this, but I think it becomes more important right now, because as we keep getting into this more of doing in the next few quarters, I would say, post COVID, it becomes very essential for us to align our personal culture along with the team culture and the organization culture as well. And one would really go through some of those aspects of change. And it's important to redefine and go through the process of reflection and rehashing yourself as well. So, culture again, very critical. I'm going to talk a little bit about process orientation and design thinking. And why I'm saying it's important is whatever we do right now in this entire process of transformation and change, whether at an individual level or at an enterprise level, it's important to keep, documenting it, keep processing it, and also keep institutionalizing it. Because some of the change that we're going right now, the changes that we're going to go through right now, are possibly never been seen, never been imagined. So when we go through this process of reorientation, it becomes very essential to completely put it through a process orientation. And as we cascade it or as we disseminate it across teams into the organization, it's essential that everybody starts relating with the entire changes simultaneously. You may have something up in your mind, but if the cascade is not effective, it actually defeats the entire purpose. Because right from the chairman to the workman, everybody needs to be oriented right from a process of change. And that's the reason I'm saying the aspect of design thinking does come into play, because one needs to really go back to the drawing board and use a lot of experimentations, innovations, put it back to the grind in terms of some of those changes. As you do some of them, you really need to answer the why, what, how, and where, and all of that through the principles of design thinking. And there is no other technique that I would suggest to anyone during this process of change. If for those of you who've really not gone through it, I would very strongly advocate to get into the principles of design thinking, because this is something that will really hold out, because this is a science of how you really reorient the entire processes, and design thinking will definitely come into play. At least it'll bring a lot of science behind your thinking and will give you a clear trajectory and a direction. Considerable emphasis to instead of calling it self-drive, I would even call it self-belief and drive. Yeah, there's a huge amount of gut that has got to come from within. Yeah, and I'm saying that the entire world will get split into three levels. And I've tweeted about it and I've spoken about it in social as well. I'm saying, how do we respond to this entire COVID situation or any transformation that we've seen in life, the large ones? There are three aspects that I see in terms of a mental state and relatedness change that happens. Number one, uh, almost 90% of the people will think through for survival. Yeah. How do I really, cross over this hump? Will I even survive? They will question their existence. They will question their basic principles of their life itself. I think some of those aspects will start coming into play, and no harm at all. I think it's very, very valid. It's almost 90% of the people will go through those emotions. Number one. Number two, I call it as the second phase or the second mindset, which is defined as level. So for those of them who slightly slipped, will want to come back to the level that they were in. That's the ambition. So that's a good ambition to have. People will say, okay, I've lost about 20% of market share. I've lost 20% of my profits. I've lost 20% of my net worth, whatever. Yeah, and they will want to come back to that level, and they're really planning. So to that extent, they become a very effective doer. They're still, driving a lot of energy to come back to that level. And I put something like a 7 to 8% of the people who will use that or fall in that particular quadrant. The third one I define, and there will be those 2% and 3% differentiators, or those wealth creators, or those value drivers in the world, who will be just 2 or 3%, post this opportunity. And if one has got to really segment there, I think whatever I'm speaking right now will become very relevant. And I call that as the excellers. Excellers are guy who are going to see everything as an opportunity. Transformation is an opportunity. When the world is turned 90 degrees or 360 degrees, there is a clear opportunity. The opportunity is for those who see themselves better, people who are able to visualize themselves better, who have a high amount of conviction, the tenacity and the resilience to go through it, and people who actually will come out, clear winners at the end of it. And people who are also got the energy to pick up from where they fail and really get up every single day on a new front. Yeah. So I think this is something which will not come easily, but one needs to work, on it at all points of time. And this is something which actually comes from the gut, and this is what is in the belly, and this is something which you've got to reignite and believe. The world is out there, and it's a choice that everyone makes, yeah, as to where you want to be. The process of evolution will happen, but there's no harm to go through this entire metamorphosis of change. Yeah, we've all gone through it many a times. It's just that with a high amount of conviction, self-belief, and drive, one can cross this with considerable amount of ease. I'm not going to spend too much of time on this global mindset. I think, there's a little bit of a risk in this entire COVIDization, as to every single country or every single business or everyone will start to look within themselves. Yeah. The aspect of, forgetting about, we're still like one planet, and then there's a global mindset, and then we've got to be, having the entire reach outside from a scalability point at some point in time is essential. Don't lose mindset of this. At this stage, there'll be a little bit of a cramping to, look at, like, very within the business, and be a little myopic, if I may use the word. But one should not lose this entire stuff. The world will come back. Maybe it'll come back on a very different kind of a feet, but one should not be thinking about, why am I even thinking of a global mindset right now, when the world is like really clamping itself and really rolling it back in terms of a deglobalization. I would still urge and say global mindset is very, very key, because at some stage when we all want to scale, this becomes, absolutely essential. And at that time, we shouldn't be caught napping. We would be possibly better off than the rest. Even at an individual level, it's important to prepare global mindset as a key competency, and not just for enterprise solutioning alone. Digital. I spoke of strategy as the first abused word. I would say digital is possibly the second one, which is like hugely abused. People who use the word digital have seldom any understanding of what digital really means holistically. They assume that they are a little, tech savvy, and they call themselves digital. Again, a simple definition of what digital is all about. There are four tenets to digital, and if these four tenets are not really answered, it does not mean it's digital. I think just be with me. Number one, digital would mean usage of technology for sure. Digital would definitely mean that you've got to change the entire customer experience and make it unique. Number one. So you've got to make customer experience very unique and distinct. Number three is you've got to make your processes very agile. If your process is running at X, it has got to be X plus something. It has got to be agile, dynamic, and nimble. And the fourth one is it has to create valuation. Whether it's business valuation or enterprise valuation or self-valuation, it doesn't matter. It has got to lead to higher value creation or valuation. Unless these four tenets are answered together, it does not mean it's digital. So the aspect of how the world is going to be ruled or the world is going to be driven, and I use this word, in many public forums. I say that I used to say, but maybe I need to, rejig or possibly need to rephrase it. I say that the world is, ruled by GAFAMA. And I coined this particular word, GAFAMA, when I'm saying that the world is dominated by Google, the Amazon, the Facebook, the Alibaba, the Microsoft, and Apple. So GAFAMA, almost 70% of the global GDP, you guys, believe it or not, is impacted some way or the other. So being digital is absolutely key and fundamental to this entire process of new age skill building. And one needs to understand at any point of time while you're building yourself on the stack of new age skills, at least be sure that you're picking up one digital or a technology stack for yourself, which will be really in good stead as we move forward, building ourselves up. The ability to telescope and microscope, I think one needs to, we are at a stage where it's so very essential that one should know how to zoom in and zoom out. If need be, one should be able to go to the last mile, to the nuts and bolts of the plant. One should be able to go to the absolutely to the last mile of the books. Yeah, if need be, that's the microscoping part of it. That's this complete zoom out. And if at all, if you need a bigger picture and you need a real, larger thinking or a blue sky, one needs to keep, I did speak about the global mindset as well. You need to keep a large vision. You need to keep a huge landscape for yourself, but you should have the ability to microscope also if needed. I think these are two complementary skills, but they are like, one single coin and two sides of the same coin. One needs to develop this ability. As we keep going up the value chain in terms of the entire leadership stack, one possibly assumes, and I go back to my first one, we start assuming that there are people to manage some of those stuff, and I don't need to be completely hands-on. I think it's a call out. You need to figure out what is that you need to be really on top and what is that you don't need to be top. I think this also raises a point of conflict that, am I stepping into the shoes of people? No, I don't think you really need to do that. You still pay the influencing hat, but the ability to go to the last mile if needed, and also to have the skills to really understand where that's coming from, is the skill that I'm talking about in this 13th skill uh, that we are on. Social consciousness, guys, I did talk about saying that social businesses are becoming bigger than bigger than commercial businesses. People are questioning not just the what of the businesses, the how of the businesses is becoming very essential. How are you doing a business is something where there's going to be a lot of conversation that's going to happen. How are you doing your role is going to be very, very essential. So the relatedness that I was speaking about, are we doing something right to the planet? Are we doing the aspects like sustainability, aspects like, clearly your value systems, contribution to the community, contribution to the society at large, is all becoming very, very essential. And post COVID, I think this will become a very, very large skill that each one of us will need to play out very, very consciously in any role. I mean, we can't be saying when I find time, I do it, or when I find time, I will be aware of it. I think it's going to be a skill that one needs to have, and it's not a choice, and it has got to come from within as well. So it's an attribute one will need to build. So social consciousness is something very, very crucial for us to build. The 15th competency that I'm talking about is how do we really be calm in the eye of the storm? What it really means is how can one even face a hurricane? How are you able to maintain your restraint? How is one able to completely stay prudently calm in situations? It's an ability. It's there in a few people. One will need to build. Did we all see this coming? COVID? Not many of us, but did we not tackle it? Are we not doing our bit? Yes, we did get a little unruffled because we were caught unprepared. We're still going through this process of change without knowing what this, the new image of us or the new image of the business is going to be. But yet, having the entire skill of being calm at any given situation is key, and one will need to practice this. I think as we go through this process of change, one will need to practice really hard, take a step back, be a little restrained, go through the process of listening well, go through the process of giving yourself the necessary time wherever it permits, yeah, and then at least not displaying panic, anxiety, fear, because none of them really help. It's a key new age skill as we go through this process of change. I'm going to also talk about agility and adaptability. Agility is the skill that how do we respond to some of those change? How agile are we? How do we quickly get into this? How dynamic are we? How have we prepared ourselves? Are all the aspects of agility that one needs to really prepare? Yeah. So it's not just learning agility; it's also responsive agility. It's also the agility in terms of how you drive your entire all the quotients together and respond to change. And along with that, a complementary stuff, many a times there are forced changes, and one would need to adapt as well. It need not necessarily be an inside out agility that you need to respond to. Yeah. It's also an issue of adaptability. When I'm saying adaptability, what it really means is sometimes when changes do happen, uh, giving in or just letting yourself be, or being a little submissive, or surrendering yourself is not necessarily signs of weaknesses. They are also signs of how you actually respond to this entire change. Yeah. So give yourself that as well, and this is the aspect that one needs to really go together. We move on to the next one, which is again innovation. I've spoken a little bit about it during the phase of design thinking and the process orientation, but the entire aspect of innovation and keeping constantly innovation not just as a process change, but driving it as a cultural change is also key. How do you really make it as part of your overall organization or a team or an individual culture where you constantly keep innovating, and whether it's product substitution or a process change or an alternative way of doing things, how do you constantly make this your ability over a period of time is something one needs to be conscious and mindful about. Make this your skill and one will stand in real good stead. We move on to the last one, and that's skilling across levels. When I'm talking about skilling across levels, all along we've realized that skilling is something which is like more, skills being imparted for you to do a role or a job. I'm using this word skilling across levels. In this process of change, in this process of whatever we're seeing right now, it's not that leadership at the top needs to be just developed. There are a lot of hard skilling that is needed right from the chairman to the workman. Everybody needs to go through hard skilling. What I really mean is some of those survival skilling, some of those living skilling, some of those digital skilling, and some of those winning skilling are all hard skills. They're not just developmental stuff which comes through just talk through or webinars like this. One has to really go through the grind in terms of how do you imbibe them, how do you really get it into your DNA hard, and that's something what I call. So I use the word leadership skilling as well as something where every single C-level leader also needs to go through. It's not just that the how part of it is the only one that leadership tackles with, and the what of it gets cascaded across the organization for others to do. Those are all classical management theories, but one needs to be very, very skillful if you've got to be really driving this change across yourself and across the entire enterprises. So with that, I pause. These are the 18 new age skills that I wanted to leave you guys with. And I've also done reasonably well on time, I can see. It's 6:47. I wanted to, I want to hand it over back to Amitabh and Subir so that we are in a position to take some questions and interactions
Webinar.
as well. Over
Yeah.
to you, Subir and Amitabh.
Yeah, very good, Rajesh. There are a few questions which are coming up. Well, his question is, what are the relevant? Uh, he says that they're all relevant. It seems like a wish list. Do you suggest 5 key skills to begin for the HR folks?
Yeah, so great. For the HR folks, what I would talk about are skills like the business sense takes a little bit of a new direction, number one. So understanding the business, not the classical, the Ulrich part of it in terms of just the business partnering. I think investing yourself completely in the new direction of the business is one key one, number one. Number two is digital becomes a very, very significant skill for the HR guys. The digital one, why I'm talking about is with the entire HR tech coming into play. Again, there will be a considerable amount of reorientation of some of those life cycle elements. One needs to really understand how to really bring it to life in terms of an enterprise. So that's the second one. The third one is, which is like slightly unique and which is slightly a gap in the HR community and fraternity, is the entire stuff that I call as quant HR. By quant HR, what I really mean is one needs to understand the implications, because in the next 1 or 2 years, I think the cost competitiveness part of it that I really alluded to again and again is something that's going to be very relevant. I don't think you need to really understand too much in detail about return on investment and return on capital employed, but one needs to understand what's the business case as far as the spends are concerned. Yes, if you're able to understand and relate it to EBITDA and relate it to PAT and show a value proposition, I think the difference between spends and the human capital part of it will need to be a skill that the HR community will really need to play, and the ability to really believe that. That's the fourth one. I think we are all in a classically in a stage where I genuinely believe, yeah, that people transformation is at the cusp of the biggest opportunity for all of us. We are all there at the right time, yeah, and the entire world is going to be rigid around people transformation. That being true, I think for the HR guys, this entire transformation and seeing this world slightly ahead of the rest, so you'll need to take a little bit of a risk and see the world a little ahead of the others and take that plunge in. That's the fourth one that I would put for the HR guys. Yeah. So what I spoke about the new age skills for the complete stack, but this four skills become absolutely key. And the fifth one is, take the plunge with a high amount of self-belief, conviction, and take failures also as it comes through, but stay with that belief. And I'm telling you, we will all go through this change quite successfully. The new phase of HR will come along with those 5 dimensions in a slightly accentuated and in an exponential manner as far as expectations are concerned from across. I hope I've clarified the 5 key skills that would be very, very relevant for the HR community.
Good. We have Manish Trivedi. Manish, can you speak up your question?
So good evening. This is Manish Dwivedi. In fact, my concept is that whether we are not leading to the world city concept from the global village concept.
I missed can you
He's
repeat
saying is
your question?
are we going back to world city concept instead of global village?
Right, sir.
I'm not sure whether I completely relate to your question, but let me take a shot at how I see the world. The world will clearly exist in 3 zones. I think for those of you who've not read the PwC the 3 zone report, I think it's a very relevant one. The entire aspect of large scale organizations and entities will exist. They are called the blue world. There will be the green world. I think the world will also drift towards when I say the green world, it's not just the green revolution, but it's also around the entire and the values and the overall the social businesses and the how part of it that I spoke about. And the third one is the orange world. The orange world is where there will be a lot of expertise, like which are the small boutique ones, but they are the expertise. Yeah. So I think there is a huge amount of change. There is space for everyone as the world recasts itself. But I'm not sure whether it's the new city world or whether it is the other analogy that you used. But I see the world evolving in this particular space, and I see some of the orange one becoming slightly bigger in this because there's a lot of need for specialization, and I see the blue one slightly diminishing in size because of the reorientation of the entire businesses and the overall GDP growth and all of them, and the green one actually also growing fairly in bit of size. So when it was put maybe a few years back, the sizes were looked at very differently. I think there will be a complete change where it will get recast slightly differently, where the orange and the green will become bigger than what they have been envisaged at this level.
Good. We have Moni Mishra. Moni, can you ask your question, please?
Okay. Good evening, all. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been a good evening with a lot of insights, Mr. Rajesh. So I have one question actually again from the HR perspective. We're all working from home. So I see a lot of firefighting happening. We are meeting deadlines and we're all, working and taking care of our institution needs as and when the need arises. And there are things that have got to be done. So we're doing all that. Now that my question is, how do I ensure some quality standard of input? Say as researchers, we are all faculty. So as researchers, we need to put in some good quality research. So say for my students who have to, take some classes and do some online learning, but I would like them to move a little ahead and do some more learning, like in a physical space, I was sitting with them outside of class and having chit chat. But I do not know how I would be able to motivate them to connect with them over Zoom or on, Microsoft Team platforms to just have those informal chats. And I'm going to miss them. And I'm a little, I find that a little challenging in today's, post-pandemic times. So I thought I could just, ask your views on that, sir.
Yeah, I don't have a magic bullet or a response to this, but nevertheless, let me take a particular shot. I think as one realizes that life is becoming more important than work. I think it is also important as we stabilize and understand this entire aspect of remote connectedness, that people respect life also along with this. So as you do this entire research, there's a massive shift that I'm seeing, and that's another topic of research for myself. I'm seeing this entire enterprise life cycle HR move to a lifestyle HR, because life is becoming bigger than work. And not only now, it always was. It's just that we fail to recognize that. And the aspect of work being a subset of life is again zooming in. So I think these are all the areas that one needs to really take cognizance of, really highlight this as a topic of research, and be aware of it as well as you practice this, going forward. To the students community, I think the entire reorientation, there are going to be humongous amount of topics that are going to be available for research. And I'm a very firm believer that, we were all born to live, but we ended up doing something because we had nothing else to do. We handed over a lot to the machines as outsourcing, and we got tackled, or we got grappled by this virus which has taken control of us. And we live in a state of suspended animation, not knowing what to do. So let us rediscover life, and let us rediscover work as a subset of life. We will get a lot of answers when we do this soul searching and reflection. So a little bit of a long and a circular response to your question,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I think I'll be happy to connect with you on a one-to-one, just to understand your question in a little more granular detail. Or alternatively, we can pick it up offline, and I'll be happy to respond it, and take it drill down to specifics as well. Thanks
It
for
will be
a
an
for
honor.
a
Yeah.
thanks for a good question.
Subhiji, can
Thanks
I
for a
ask
good
a question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
please.
Okay. Rajesh, one thing which I have seen by working with clients is, in this whole atmosphere, whatever has happened, the trust has disappeared among different, stakeholders. Employees don't trust the company, they don't trust the HR, because whatever the crisis has happened, all of a sudden you are seeing, scenarios where companies have gone on I would say, the mad cost cutting spree, or even job cutting spree. Workers have migrated back to their hometown. Some of them have walked over, 4 days, 5 days, 1 week, just to go back to their villages. And today, industries at a stages where even if the factories are open, there are no more workers to run it. So how do we go about building the trust back into the system?
Great question, Amitav, and I'm relishing this question. Yeah.
Yes.
So let me see how well I'm able to respond. Your question will possibly remain greater than my response, but let me take a shot at it. I think the first and foremost, as I said, we've practiced this aspect of people first. A lot of companies do talk about it. This is possibly the first time every single business is really being tested on its feet. Are people and our businesses treating people similar to the way that they would treat their customers? And the validation of this is what is going to hold out the trust factor. So I see trust as an outcome and trust not as a starting point here. The more and more organizations reflect, the more and more leadership reflects and really goes back to the drawing board in terms of their basic culture and understand that, how they need to treat people, how do they really need to care. This is not a stage where we've evolved in the last 60, 70 years across various models of satisfaction, employee support, employee, joy, ecstasy, delight. We've used many employee centricity. We're genuinely talking about employee care. The aspect of it, am I really moving you? Am I really genuinely coming across? It has to come from within. I think it is not just the mind part of it, where you deal with it. Right now, I think between the organizations and the people, there's just a crossover of minds that have happened. The alignment or the rope between the hearts and the soul will need to happen. That's the only way how a trust can be built, and organizations and leadership will need to commit themselves to this particular phase. Unless they demonstrate, act, and really respond to situations where they will really treat people similar to customers, the trust will get, possibly will slip out. Yeah, that's the only channel. It's a lot of hard work. You need to rebuild this, and that's the only way organizations will come back to the level, and from there will start excelling. For those who have, for those of them who have caught reasonable cash balances, the opportunity for them to, set aside and be a little more prudent and caring is the ask. Yeah. For those of you who are really in distress, maybe I think the situation could be very difficult and different. But I think there's also got to be an equal amount of empathy and care and responsiveness from the employee's side to figure out as to where businesses are. Yeah. They need to see the real one. Yeah. They can't be seeing just the social side of, employment alone. One needs to really, some of those skills that I spoke about, they have to make themselves relevant. They also have to hold it. They have to see the organization's direction. They have to see how businesses are. They need to see the financials as well. So there's a lot of one-to-one between the employees and the organization that will need to come into play in this entire transformation. And that's the post-COVID phase particularly, because this during the COVID phase is still like, a gray zone. Yeah, that's the zone where this will get manifested. Great question, Amitabh, and absolutely delighted. I hope I've been able to answer and
No,
respond
perfectly.
reasonably. Yeah.
And I just to put it, sum up in one sentence, I would call as, the time is now for organizations to think of employee care and employee engagement and employee delete can wait some time. Time will come for that also.
There's a question from Digvijay Patil. He says, Digvijay, can you ask your question, please?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello, sir. Great session. Lot of learning, and thank you for that. I'm a student at TISS, first year of my master's, and I would like to ask you, apart from this COVID, work from home is going to stay there for a long. So how organizations can actually check on the mental health of their employees? Because they are not going to be in a same building, or HR cannot go and check with their teammates. So how it's going to actually happen?
Again, great question. I didn't pick up your name. Did you say your name was? What's your name, sir?
My name is Digvijay Patil, sir.
Digvijay from TIS, did I hear? Are you from TIS?
Yes. From
okay,
TIS.
Great question, Digvijay. And this is one of the areas that I'm actually really, working on. I call it the lifestyle HR, because as people get into more of remote way of functioning and remote way of, organizing themselves, and where they're going to deal with their life and work together, I think the entire organization, as far as HR is concerned, will need to reorient themselves. I believe a lot of expertise around reorienting people to remote working, particularly on expertise, is going to come from outside. Yeah. So whether it is counseling, or whether it is coaching, or whether it is like, capability building, or whether it's like guiding you on your next career transition, all of this help are not going to come from your internal HR organization, which possibly gets into more doing. And a lot of it will possibly come from outside. A lot of expertise platform will get set. Yeah. And that's one area I'm also focusing on as an opportunity. Yeah. I'm also really doing a considerable amount of research and also trying to productize in times of life. I call it the lifestyle HR solutioning outside, where I can build a platform and an expertise. So one will need to bolt on, because it will be unfair to expect that the organization will have a complete repository and a repertoire of things where they'll be able to quickly feed into every single aspect of solutioning. At the same time, your entire internal HR may also not be geared to, because this is not something that they've been exposed to. As they build this entire stack, it may not be a bad idea to piggyback on expertise from outside. And borrowing is the only answer to your question, Digvijay. Yeah, and stay tuned, stay connected with me, and you will see. I speak a lot on this particular aspect, and I'll build more products and solutions on this as well. So you can keenly watch me doing this. We will take it offline, and I'll be happy to connect and talk more about this as well. But for the limited purpose of this particular call and for the purpose of this webinar, suffice to say that there will be an expertise and a specialized SME services that will need to borrow to enable the employer-employee relationship and make it really lively and work in this remote zone of new age working. Thank you, Digvijay. Exceedingly a good question.
Rajesh ji, this is Uttam Lal. I'll just further add to it the practice which NTPC has already adopted as far as the counseling is concerned. I'm just sharing my information, sir. In fact, if you are aware of NTPC, we have a PMI. Now it is NSB, NTPC School of Business 16. So we have a counseling center for all our employees and their family members, which is called as NEHAL. But in this COVIDization era, what we have done, we have make it online. So even if a person sitting at far off 1,000 kilometers away from Delhi, like my place, he can go online. Like as you suggested that we have to take the help of external psychologist or an expert, he can go online, he can, and it's completely confidential. He can take the help of that particular counselor. And although there are very stray cases, as we do have a very lot of employee engagement practices over here, but still a few family members, they need this. So we have started this practice. This online started, we have just started in the March 20 itself. So that's what I wanted to share this practice we adopted.
Uttam, I'll piggyback on this, and I'll connect with you. I'll need to learn this. I'm very keen. And
no, sir, I'm just sharing. But we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Subir.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, for your time and valuable inputs. I think these 18 points make a lot of sense, and all of us going forward need to own these skills, learn them, and try to enrich ourselves going forward to make ourselves employable in the coming times. Thank you very much. Much appreciate your time. Thank you, Amitabh.
Thank you, Rajesh. Oh, welcome.
Thank
Anytime.
Thank
you, Rajesh.
Thanks, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thanks
so
a lot,
much.
Rajesh ji, Subir, and Amitabh ji. Thanks a lot.
Oh, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.